Hello everyone, my name's Chris and today I'll be taking a close look at Samyang's popular 8mm f3.5 fisheye lens, designed for cameras with an APS-C sensor. This is the new version of the lens with a detachable hood. It's also been known as the HD version, which means Hood Detachable. But it's no longer marketed with the HD moniker because people mistakenly thought it just meant high definition. Well, we'll find out later whether or not it is. Now, fisheye lenses give you a huge field of view. They're basically ultra-wide-angle lenses, but with a large amount of barrel distortion. They're an enormous amount of fun for getting all kinds of pictures, inside and outside, and they can be pretty useful for doing attention-grabbing video work too. It's loads of fun having a fisheye lens, and they can be genuinely useful too. But it's the kind of thing you'll only want to use from time to time, as the effect can get a bit worn out if you're not careful. So most people don't actually own one of these lenses because they also tend to be expensive. However, the Samyang 8mm f3.5 fisheye bucks this trend by only costing about £250. That's potentially quite a major bargain, so it really opens up the world of fisheye photography to a lot of people. As I mentioned already, this lens is designed for cameras with the slightly smaller sized APS-C sensor. So here's some footage on my Canon 70D. As you can see, even with the lens's hood in place, the fisheye image covers your entire image frame. If you try to mount this lens on a full frame camera, here's the image you'll get. It's rectangle shaped because the lens hood is causing vignetting in the edges. However, on this new version of the lens, that hood is detachable. So there we go. Now we can get a lot more coverage on a full frame camera. There's still a lot of darkness on the right and left hand sides though, so how useful the image actually is to you depends on what you want to do. Still, it's nice to have the option to take the hood off if you want to, and it gives me an excuse to test the lens on a full frame camera, which I'll do later in this video. Just something to note for you. According to Samyang, this version of the lens has exactly the same optics as the older version did, which didn't have a detachable hood. And something else to bear in mind is that Samyang are working on bringing out a full-frame version of this lens, the 12mm f2.8 fisheye. I gave it a try at Photokina this year and it looked great, so that could be something to consider too. Well anyway, let's look at this lens's build quality. Considering how inexpensive this is, you might think that the lens would be cheaply constructed. However, it's actually a tough little thing of beauty. There's lots of metal in the construction, all put together with tight tolerances. It's a fully manual lens that doesn't communicate with your camera, so you'll have to set the aperture and focus yourself. The aperture ring neatly clicks into place from f3.5 to 5.6, and then it clicks again every half stop between f5.6 and f22. The focus ring is extremely smooth and very well damped. Some people might be worried about using a manual focus lens, but it's actually no problem at all, because fisheye lenses have such a huge depth of field. Almost everything tends to be in focus, especially at narrower apertures. The lens comes with a large front cap which fits very positively and securely over the front element, attaching to the hood. The detachable lens hood itself also sits in place very securely. Overall, you couldn't really ask for any better build quality for a manual focus lens. It's a pleasure to use. Well, let's take a look at the all-important picture quality. Seeing as this lens is primarily designed for use on APS-C cameras, I'll start by testing it on my 20 megapixel Canon 70D. With the aperture wide open at f3.5, the lens is reasonably sharp, although we do see a bit of a lack of contrast. The sharpness levels remain about the same in the corners, where we also see some quite noticeable chromatic aberration, but that is normal for most fisheye lenses. However, all you need to do is top the lens down to f5.6 and you get absolutely fantastic sharpness and contrast levels from those corners and right back into the middle. That is very sharp image quality indeed. Stop down again to f8 for a tiny increase in sharpness from the middle of the image and back into the corners. The green and purple chromatic aberration is still there, but it seems to be quite reduced. The lens remains this sharp until about f16, and at f22, the effects of diffraction kick in and the picture looks a bit softer. But overall, this Samyang lens gives good picture quality at f3.5, and it's very impressive indeed from f5.6. It really is a very high resolution lens, especially for the money you're paying. Well, this lens's detachable hood makes it more useful on a full frame camera than the previous version, so let's take a look at how it performs on a 20 megapixel Canon 6D. Impressively, the image looks even sharper. At f3.5 we see very good resolution in the middle of the image frame and good sharpness in the corners too, with a little less chromatic aberration than there was on APS-C. This increased sharpness and decreased colour fringing is what you'd expect to see on a larger sensor of a full-frame camera, but still, the lens makes a good impression, and when you stop it down to f5.6, the image quality becomes astonishingly sharp, from the corners back into the middle. Even down to f22, the lens remains very sharp indeed. So, if you are inclined to use this lens on a full-frame camera, despite the vignetting, then you will easily get some extremely rewarding results. Just for fun, let's take a quick look at this lens's rather extreme distortion characteristic. This Samyang lens actually has a special type of stereographic barrel distortion, which means that the fisheye effect is a little more gentle than that found on other fisheye lenses, especially in the corners of the image. I actually quite like the gentler distortion pattern of this lens. Another positive attribute is that this lens works quite well against bright lights, producing only a little bit of flaring. The contrast levels also remain quite good. That's important for a fisheye lens, where you can easily catch the sun in your picture. Overall, the Samyang 8mm f3.5 fisheye is an exciting piece of kit. Lots of fun to use, and it also has an impressively high resolution. I'd have no problems using this lens for professional work, and it's handy just to have one around in your kit bag. It also happens to be fantastic value for money. I'm happy to say that it comes very highly recommended.